blew my mind. I had a really cool story. I went to a data center event in London in March, and so this is a couple of months after I started the podcast. I was probably 4 or 5 episodes in, and I went to the event on my own. It was actually one that I went to the year before as well in March, and at that point I was only a few months into the industry. I was still working at my old company, and I stupidly put on my name tag recruitment consultant. So you can imagine how that went, trying to dip into people's conversations. I didn't get too much time. A lot of my meetings got cancelled. I probably spoke to 2 people, whereas this year, a year on in the journey, 3 months into having my own company, 2 months into having the podcast, and people were giving me so much time. People were wanting to come and meet me. I was spending 2 hours with certain people that I never would have spoke to before. I sat on the floor and ate lunch with another founder who I'm now very good friends with, and we're working together. We're doing some things in the background which are pretty cool. Again, I wouldn't have had those opportunities without putting myself out there and then also going to the event. Cool story is I was walking through, and it was towards the end of the second day, so I was pretty wiped out, and all of a sudden some guy comes over, Freddie Briffett, legend, great guy in the industry, and he puts his hand out with a big smile and he says, "You're James Wilkinson, you do the Critical Connect podcast, I'm such a huge fan." "You're a fan?" "I'm just James Wilkinson." It was such a cool moment, and it gave me a lot of energy, and it gave me more energy to just keep bringing out this cool content. So hi, this is James Wilkinson, the host of the Critical Connect podcast and the talent solutions provider in the data center construction space, and you're now watching the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast.
Hi, it's Joshua Feinberg, host of the Data Center Go-to-Market podcast, and I'm thrilled to be welcoming a very special guest. Joining me today is James Wilkinson, who is the host of the Critical Connect podcast. He specializes in data center construction, recruiting, and talent solutions, and James is based in the UK. James, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Joshua. Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited to see where the conversation takes us.
I'm excited to have you here as well, because data centers are getting built at a much faster pace than they were 5 or 10 years ago. So I imagine there's a lot of demand for your services and talents to help find the right talent in data centers.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a bit of a strange time at the moment. As you said there, the rate data centers are being built, or at least wanting to be built, is outweighing the amount of people, I would say, that have the capability to do so just yet. So it's a bit of a weird period. That's what I'll say.
We found the power. We found a site with power. We got all the approvals. Wait,
yeah.
Where's the people who are going to do the actual work?
Basically, yeah. That's that's a lot of the struggle at the moment, and I think as well it also goes back to probably education, really, and just a lack of awareness about the data center industry. Construction is huge as a whole, but data centers, no one really knows about them. I mean, before I got into data center recruitment, I didn't necessarily know about them myself either. And I think if people did have that awareness, it'd thrive much more than it is.
So that's a great place to start with better understanding. How did you originally get awareness of the data center industry? What brought you to your current role, hosting a podcast and specializing in recruiting within the data center segment? Is this something that you've mapped out throughout the course of your career? Did you always know that you'd want to go into some kind of recruiting when you were younger, when you were a teen?
So I'll answer that last bit first. The answer is no. And I think if you ask most people that work in recruitment, the answer would be no. I started out wanting to, so I always knew I wanted to run my own company, is what I would say, but I didn't necessarily know what it would be in. So I started going down the financial services route, and that's due to my godfather. He's been very successful in financial services. I grew up seeing him with the flashy car, the nice house. I wanted that for myself. So I was sort of tunnel vision towards that. So I got into financial services, actually working for his company, and it really wasn't for me. And I was a little bit lost, I must say. So I was at this point, 19 years old. I'd been working at the company for a couple of years. Again, just very lost, not knowing what path I wanted to take. And one of my friends was in recruitment, IT recruitment. And so he suggested I give it a go. So I first started working at a company called Circle Recruitment, IT recruitment company. And I did really well. You know, I've always had the ability to speak to people and build those relationships. So a lot of my role is on the phone, speaking to people, trying to break into new clients, speak to candidates. And so when I realized that I could do that, and I did quite well for myself, I would say, at that company. I sort of hit the peak that I think I could, and so I got to market myself. And so I stumbled across a company, and I didn't actually know that they did data centers. It was quite weird, actually. I approached them just speculatively, and there were four teams that I could have got put onto, and it just so happened that I got put on the data center team. And again, at this point, I'd never even heard of a data center. You know, I've been using YouTube, Netflix, sending emails, calling people, sending text messages, and I had no clue where all of that was stored, where it was going. I just thought it happened, which sounds probably quite silly. But the more I learned about it, the more research I did into the industry, the more people I spoke to, I realized, okay, yeah, this is going somewhere, and there is a lot of success to be had. So after doing considerably well at that company, I decided, hey, let's give it a go on my own and see what I can do. I'm 4 months into the journey. It's been up and down already. I think a lot of founders would say the same. It's going from working in an office environment where you can bounce off people, and you know someone else is having maybe not so good of a day, and you can go, oh yeah, you know, it's one of those days, to being on my own and not having that ability to speak to people that may be having the same issue as me. That's been quite a change, I would say. But yeah, overall, I'm absolutely loving it. Again, it's relationship building, and that's what I would say I'm good at. And I now have the ability to do my own thing, hence the podcast, which I basically started to interview senior leaders. They discuss their careers. We speak about the industry trends and struggles. We also leave a little bit of advice for next generation or people that maybe want to do a sidestep into data centers. And I've learned a heck of a lot since speaking to these people. And it's just been, yeah, it's been a very rewarding thing, and I'm excited to see how it keeps progressing. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, my journey into the industry. Yeah, let's see where we can keep getting to, I suppose.
I think what you bring up is a really interesting point about podcasting. Is a lot of times people approach it from the standpoint of, well, it's content marketing, it's events, it's thought leadership. The reality, though, is when you're using it very deliberately for a specific segment within a specific niche, as you start talking to more and more people within that, you start to see commonalities. You start to see, like, compare and contrast. You start to see trends, and it almost feels like after a while that you're gathering insights that feel almost like being a research analyst.
Yeah, definitely. It was scary, the first one, because I would say, relatively new to the industry compared to the people that I'm interviewing. I mean, I'm speaking to people that have been in the industry for 20 plus years, and I've been in it for sort of a year and a half. So it was quite intimidating. But what I would say about the people in data centers, everyone seems so lovely, and everyone has that willingness to help people. So as long as you've got that willingness to learn and chuck yourself in the deep end a little bit, yeah, people are very supportive.
Yeah, it's for sure. And one of the more interesting challenges with being relatively new to the data center industry is just understanding how big the industry is, not just in the sheer number of people, but how many different segments there are. Like, we organize it into the operators, like the colocation and wholesale and hyperscale data centers. And there's all of the technology companies, like dozens of different kinds of technology companies, a dozen or so different kinds of facilities companies. We kind of put like construction and real estate and the investors in another part because they're so closely related, joined at the hip. And then there's a whole bunch of different kinds of outsourced sales and marketing companies, of which we actually consider recruiting part of outsourced sales and marketing, because you're taking care of a pipeline generation function for your clients.
Yeah. It's I think recruitment, it's definitely sales. It's definitely sales. But I think you could probably have them all in their own little sectors, if you will. But I think for ease, it does all just get sort of chucked into the same bowl. I mean, what's your sort of take on that?
Yeah, it's there by the nature of you being so focused on just construction companies, you should be able to get a lot, build that beachhead a lot faster, because you're so hyper focused on a certain set of job functions. And like, are there 5 or 10 or 20 or 30 different job functions you're recruiting for? At some point, there should be a finite list where, okay, like I've seen this particular job requirement several times already. It feels comfortable. I know the kinds of candidates I'm looking for. Whereas if you were doing recruiting for the entire data center industry, okay, how many different kinds of companies does a cybersecurity company hire? Does a data center storage company hire? Does a decommissioning company hire? At some point, it gets overwhelming. You have, we catalog like 57 different business models. There could be 10, 20, 30 different jobs in each of those. It's really hard to get deep expertise if you're all over the place. Yeah,
it wouldn't work. It really wouldn't work. If you've got one company, unless you've got a company of hundreds of recruiters that can do those specific segments in the industry. If you're, say, someone like me who's at the moment a lone ranger, it would not work, because you need to have that strong network. And if you're trying to network with, like you said there, 30 plus different segments that are in the industry, you're not going to have proper connections. So for me, working within construction, I focus more on the design phase, the construction and site management phase, project management and commissioning management, which might sound like a lot, but they're all quite close. So for instance, design, you see a lot of design people, they will go later on in life maybe to the commissioning side of things, because they've got to link the designs to what's being installed. So you do see those sort of overlaps. But I think for me in recruitment, the most important thing is having that strong network. If I speak to a client and they say, hey, we're looking for a senior electrical commissioning manager in Amsterdam, I would have people to go and speak to. They may not be available, which is one of the issues that we're coming across, but I would at least have someone to go and speak to who may know somebody, And it is just about that, just having those strong relationships and not making it so transactional, which I think a lot of recruiters do in the industry. And I think that's why we potentially have a little bit of a bad reputation, because a lot of people just are transactional. It's, hey, have you got a role I can fill? No, bye. Or, hey, do you need a job? No, bye. And they're not building out the relationships for the future. They're not thinking down the road. So yeah, that's what I would say. I probably got on a little bit of a tangent there, but yeah.
Oh, I think you bring up a couple of really interesting points. One is when I talk to chief revenue officers or division director types, it's increasingly common among sales teams that they're specializing in one of two different ways. They're either specializing by deal size. In other words, they have people that are really good at closing a high volume of small, medium-sized business sales, and then they separate out mid-market and they separate out enterprise. And then we're also seeing a lot of teams that are organized by vertical. Healthcare specialist, manufacturing specialist, telecommunications specialist. And that's exactly what you're doing. You took 3 or 4 different kinds of businesses within the data center industry. So you're able to build that institutional knowledge and being able to operate more like a consultant and a teacher and a trusted advisor, subject matter expert, rather than just focused on bringing the hiring manager and the candidates together.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that also links to the transparency. If I'm working with a client and they may hire for a few things that I don't necessarily have a network for, I'll always be honest and I'll say, yeah, I don't really have someone I can go and speak to now. If you want me to look at it, I can, but I can't promise anything within the next week or maybe even 2 weeks. And again, I think that's another thing where we fall short is that transparency. People just saying, yeah, I can help you when realistically they can't. And then down the road, it just snowballs and it doesn't work out for anyone.
I think what a lot of people too that are outside of recruiting may not realize is that it's almost like you have two different pipelines going on all the time. You have, I don't know how you organize your CRM, but if I was looking at this, I would think that you'd want to have like a deals board of hiring managers where you're working on job requirements, and then a completely separate pipeline process for candidates. Because if you have a whole bunch of hiring manager job relationships and you have no candidates, you're sunk. If you have a lot of relationships with candidates and you don't have good relationships with hiring managers with open job requirements, you can't really help them. So it's like rubbing your belly and patting your head at the same time.
Yeah, that is one of the struggles is, let's say I pick up 5 new roles. That's all I'm doing. All I'm doing is speaking to candidates, trying to fill those requirements for clients. And then you get to the end of filling those roles, and because all you've been doing is speaking to candidates, you've not spoken to as many clients as you would like to. So then your pipeline for after those roles might be, affected. So it is trying to find that balance, and I think it's just about being clever with your time, and prioritizing what is most important, but also keeping time for that business development, even if you are trying to fill some of the requirements for clients. Make sure that you are still on the ball, trying to find those next roles to fill. That's what I would say on that.
One trend that a lot of people are noticing, as well, as that increasingly people are doing so much research on their own before they're open to having a sales kind of conversation, which the reality is a lot of what you're doing is selling candidates on having a conversation with you, selling hiring managers on having a conversation with you. So the self-driven journey where it used to be like 10 years ago where people did some research, but they'd get like halfway through and they'd be ready for vendor contact. In the 2010s, it was like 56% of the way over before these conversations. Now it's like 83%. It's like they're almost ready to make a decision by the time they get to you. You were first getting in this industry when that already existed. So it's not like you've had this nostalgic moment of like, hey, remember when it used to be easier to get people to take my meetings? Has that adjusted your own strategy for how you've gone to market and building your brand and doing your own lead generation?
I think so. The go-to-market side of things, I think your personal brand is very important. So I've been on the LinkedIn content creation journey for about a year now. I committed to it. I said, let's post daily, or at least every other day. So there's certain weeks I might accidentally miss a day, or I might miss 2 days. But generally, I've been very on the ball. So I think that is very important. I mean, yourself how powerful LinkedIn is as a tool. So I try and bring industry news. With the podcast now, I'll do clips of people I'm interviewing and their opinions on certain trends. And it's also a place for me to reach out to candidates, and it is also a place for me now to reach out to clients. So let's say 10 years ago, like you mentioned there, I mean, that was a little bit before my recruitment journey started, but I think it was a lot easier for people to pick up the phone and have maybe a 20-minute conversation with someone, and pick up some new business, because there was a lot less competitors in the industry, from a recruitment company standpoint, and B, I think data centers now, people are just so busy. It's hard to pin people down. Even people I've got strong relationships with, I sometimes struggle to pin them down for, say, a 15-20 minute conversation, because they may be one day in London, the next day they're in Frankfurt. I mean, I was speaking to someone earlier. I got a couple of minutes. He's like, "Hey, I'm in Frankfurt. Then tomorrow I'm in London speaking at an event. Can we speak Friday?" So, people are busy. The industry's busy, so it's tough to pin people down. So actually, what I find is quite successful is just messaging on LinkedIn. People have much more time to reply to a message, then if they see a phone call pop up, they go, "Oh, I'll call them back later," and then they have 10 fires to fight, and then they completely forget to give you a call back, and then you're then one day behind. So I think, the go-to-market standpoint, yeah, social media is, I think, in over the next couple of years, still going to be quite prevalent, because people, if people are having a little bit of a period of procrastination, what do people like to do? They like to have a little scroll. So if they go on LinkedIn and have a little scroll, "Oh, James is there again. James is there again," and I'm sort of just front of mind. And I hope it's working. I think it is. I do see a little bit more success coming my way through people recognizing me from the industry, on LinkedIn and through my podcast. And then, ultimately, people buy from people, right? So you need to have some authenticity about you. Be yourself. Don't be someone that you're not, even on social media, because as soon as you have 2 or 3 conversations with said person, they're going to see right through it. So yeah, I try and just stay myself, and I hope it's working. We'll see. We'll see.
LinkedIn's played a really interesting role in this industry. It used to be, in the relatively early days of LinkedIn, going back 15 plus years or so, it was perceived as a place where you put basically your online resume, and it was a place where people went to go look for jobs. Now, in many ways, LinkedIn has become not only your second CRM, but it also serves in a lot of ways as the nonstop conference that goes 24 hours a day, 7 days a week across all time zones. And then in addition to that, you mentioned something in passing as well, is that a lot of people will not even take a meeting with someone without going to their LinkedIn profile and vetting and checking them out. I go through this all the time by the nature of what I do. If someone reaches out to me and I look at their LinkedIn profile, and it's very obvious that their profile picture is a minimum of 20 years old, and they have 73 connections, and they haven't posted in the last 90 days. They can say all they want that they're keeping up, but I know they are not going to be a good internal champion for anything related to digital.
Yeah. And sales. I think, as well. Again, it comes back to the branding side of things. As a salesperson, doesn't matter what industry it's in. It could be recruitment, it could be selling a certain product, it could be selling another service. Having that LinkedIn profile, it's someone's first. It's like a CV, right? It's not just your work history and stuff like that. It's like a personal CV. And if you go on there and they've got, like you said, a 20-year-old profile picture, or not even a profile picture, or they've got 20 connections, are they going to trust that person? Or are they going to trust the person that's posting every day good content about the industry, have got a nice pretty picture of themselves, have got a few thousand connections? I think 9 times out of 10 they're going to trust that person, in my opinion. So yeah, it's a very important tool. LinkedIn, it's a very important tool.
I talk a lot too about the concept of a buyer's journey and being able to get in early in the journey as opposed to late in the journey. When I think about how many data center recruiters are trying to grow pipeline on LinkedIn, a lot are just focused on posting job requirements, which I consider decision stage content. It's the exact same thing as if someone that's in sales for a colocation provider is constantly just putting up promotions about space that they have available and discounts. They're making no effort whatsoever to provide useful educational content or facts or best practices that would help anyone. All they're really trying to do is to get everyone. They're basically proposing marriage on the first date. And in a world where people do so much research on their own before they get to you, the more competition there is, the more incredibly important it is to have that leverage to be seen as the expert. And it's nearly impossible to do if people perceive that you're just transactional?
Yeah, you're absolutely spot on. And I love that as well. The asking for marriage on the first date. That's it's a great analogy.
It's a funny romantic comedy movie, but the
Yeah,
reality is
about the recruiter and a candidate.
You're dealing with people more on the construction and the design and the architecture and the commissioning. A lot of the same sales allergies that IT professionals have bled over to most of the rest of the industry. So the moment that people figure out that all you're trying to do is advance the sales process and get them on the deal board, and you don't have anything of value to share with them, it's really, really difficult to advance that relationship. And I think a brilliant idea for you to start out this early on with being a recruiter to immediately go to having an interview-based podcast. One, because you're building relationships, you're building evergreen content, you can aggregate trends. It's a great research lab. It leads to so many things. In a lot of ways, the interview-based podcast is almost like the first date for doing a whole bunch of other things potentially together, some of which could lead to hiring manager relationships, some of which could lead to candidate relationships, but it can also lead to webinar panels. It can lead to offline panels. It can lead to offline events. It can lead to aggregating into books, ebooks, blogs. There's so many things that you can do when you have that stable foundation. That the challenge is eventually, with hundreds of thousands of people in this industry, what happens if there's 50,000 data center podcasts instead of just a few hundred? But I think there's a lot of people that are looking for highly specialized information.
That's why I jumped in now. Get ahead, get all the interviews done before, like you said, there's thousands of other podcasts, because I do think that podcasting as well is going to be another go-to-market trend. I think in the next couple of years we can see even more podcasts brought out, and I don't just mean from a recruitment standpoint. I mean, basically anybody can start a podcast. There's no real requirements to start a podcast. If you want to do it, you can go and do it. It's tough balancing it with also trying to do the job that brings the money in. But it's something that I really enjoy. And actually, going back to something you said about people struggling to, say, book meetings with certain professionals in the industry, I think from maybe a selfish standpoint, what the podcast has actually allowed me to do is have those conversations with people that maybe if I were to give them a call, I'd get 2 minutes tops before they have to dart somewhere else. The podcast has given me the ability to have a 30-minute conversation about the podcast, and then record the podcast for an hour, and then have a post-podcast meeting and discuss, what we spoke about and how we thought it went. And there you've got 2 hours of conversation with someone intimately that I may never have got the opportunity to speak to before. There's some of the people I'm speaking to are so senior, and when I was just doing my general cold calling, I wouldn't have even dreamed of having 2 hours of conversation with someone like that. So now I'm able to speak to those people. It's very rewarding. But what I will say actually is, if we are looking at it from that standpoint, I have managed to gain a little bit of traction with certain clients, but not people I've actually spoke to on the podcast. It's people who listen to it, which it blew my mind. I had a really cool story. I went to a data center event in London in March, and so this is a couple of months after I started the podcast. Yeah, a couple of months. I was probably 4 or 5 episodes in, and I went to the event on my own. It was actually one that I went to the year before as well, in March. And at that point, I was only a few months into the industry. I was still working at my old company, and I stupidly put on my name tag recruitment consultant. So you can imagine how that went, trying to dip into people's conversations. I didn't get too much time. A lot of my meetings got cancelled. I probably spoke to 2 people. Whereas this year, a year on in the journey, 3 months into having my own company, 2 months into having the podcast, and people were giving me so much time. People were wanting to come and meet me. I was spending 2 hours with certain people that I never would have spoke to before. I sat on the floor and ate lunch with another founder who I'm now very good friends with, and we're working together. We're doing some things in the background which are pretty cool. Again, I wouldn't have had those opportunities without putting myself out there and then also going to the event. But the cool story is I was walking through, and it was towards the end of the second day, so I was pretty wiped out. And all of a sudden, some guy comes over, Freddie Briffett, legend, great guy in the industry, and he puts his hand out with a big smile and he says, "You're James Wilkinson. You do the Critical Connect podcast. I'm such a huge fan." And I thought, what? You're a fan? I'm just James Wilkinson. Like, what do you mean? But it was such a cool moment, and it gave me a lot of energy, and it gave me more energy to just keep bringing out this cool content. So yeah, that's a little bit of a story.
Yeah, for a lot of people that are thinking about hosting an interview-based podcast, what they may not realize is one of the very tangible benefits is when the episode releases, something as simple as mentioning the guest causes almost everyone to like and share and comment. And then what you tend to find is the first people that are hitting the like button and continuing to amplify it tend to be their peers, their coworkers, some of their former coworkers, and before you know it, with relatively modest reach, your one interview got in front of at least a couple dozen or more people that are where there's no like and trust with your guest. And some of that, what do they call that? Transitive trust. Some of that starts to flow over to you, and you start to get these notes from people that are like, great interview, really enjoyed it.
It was just crazy. I've had a couple of people message me and say, "Oh, hey, I love this episode. Keep on going." But for a lot of the time, I do just put it out there, and people like it and people comment on it and people might share it, but I don't really know what people's takes are on it. I'm just hoping that people are enjoying it. So when someone came up to me and said that, it was quite a surreal moment. I must say, I didn't believe it. Like, no, you don't listen to me. But I do want to make it clear as well that this isn't a BD tool. This is going back to one of the issues I spoke about earlier, is advice for people trying to get into the industry, because we're struggling. We really are. There's a lot of skilled professionals. It's just the availability of them, and you're now seeing data center developers and clients, as they're getting busier. So are the consultancies. So are the contractors. So are the commissioning agents. It funnels down, but because they're getting busier, they're now taking people from all those companies, and who wouldn't want to work for Microsoft or a Google or a data center developer over potentially a contractor or a consultancy where you're doing the kicking as opposed to being kicked. So because of that, again, I'd say it's the consultancies and contractors that are struggling the most, because the developers and clients are sadly getting first dibs on available people.
Raised an interesting point as well, where you don't necessarily see this as a direct business development tool, but more as a long play. And I think that's a really important point for anyone that's thinking they're going to start a podcast. And this is essentially lead generation for the top of their funnel. If you have a guest on your show and they sense that the only reason that you had them on the show was to put them in a sales process, word spreads fast, and you're doing the exact this is all about building trust. So it needs the conference business, regardless of whether you're talking about the data center industry or just business to business and technology conferences in general, have had to navigate this for years. Like, there's the editorial speaking slots, and there's the stands, there's the booths. And if you don't have a clear separation between the editorial interests and the commercial interests, magazines have had to navigate this for decades, whether they're print magazines or now digital, where there's articles and there's ads. And the moment people start to be like, that conference, like, most of the people there are pay to play, most of the people are paying for speaking, and that's exactly what you're trying to avoid. personally had that happen where I've been invited to speak at conferences, and the only way I'm allowed to go back the next year is by buying it. So it really was, there's a lot of authenticity that you can help by being transparent with all this. And then there's a lot of things that you can sabotage yourself. I've had clients too, where they're trying to figure out how quickly they can get ROI on podcasting. And if they're asking that question already, they may as well not even start, because it's a long game.
It's not going to work. Like you said, if your sole mission from starting a data center podcast or any podcast is to generate new business, people are going to see right through it. It might take a couple of episodes, but people are going to see through it. And when I have pre-podcast calls with the guests, a couple of them have asked me, is this a new BD tool? And I'll say no. But I will also follow up with that and say, but if it leads to that, I'm not going to turn it away, but that isn't my main mission. The main mission is to, first of all, give these leaders a platform to speak about their careers. A lot of people, generally like to speak about themselves, and it's nice when you see one of the guests, as they're speaking, they remember certain things and they have a little spark in their eye, and it's something they've not thought about for ages, potentially 20, 25 years ago in their early career days. And it's really nice to see that. And then it is also a platform as well for people to discuss their opinions on, sustainability issues, power shortages, talent shortages, all those struggles that most companies are feeling the wrath of. It gives them the platform to discuss their opinion on it. And then also, as I said, it's for the advice for next generation or someone that's looking to do a sidestep into the industry. But if someone wants to give me some new business from it, I'm not going to say no. It's just one of those. That's what I would say. That's what I would say.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.
James, when you think about even wider than the data center construction companies to what's going on at a macro level within the industry, what do you think is the biggest problem or biggest challenge that companies are facing across the board?
The biggest problem in data centers?
Yeah.
Genuinely, I do think the talent shortage is the main, or one of the main issues. I don't want to speak too much from other industries because I am solely on construction, so my opinion might not go too far elsewhere. But I do genuinely think it is lack of available talent, and I think it probably stems from early education. Like I said before, not having specific courses on data centers. I mean, that's crazy to me, right? All governments around the world want to be the leader in data centers, but they're not getting to the root cause and having specific courses at university that you can do within data centers. There just doesn't seem to be much noise going on, which again is why the podcast that you're doing, that I'm doing, I know there's other people that are doing them as well. I think they're really important to bring those topics to light. And I speak to some people that are doing a lot. I spoke to a guy, Gabe Andrews, recently. I think you've had him on your podcast in the past as well. I know that he has like schools that he'll go to and he'll do talks, and he'll talk about the interesting side of data centers, and try and get people riled up. And he's like, even if just one of those people plays a part in building the next data center on the moon or something like that, he'll be chuffed. But I think it is really important to get in there early, and it doesn't feel like it's happening.
Yeah, I've had this conversation with a lot of people on the podcast of how early you actually need to influence career choices. And a lot of the more formal efforts go to colleges and go to high schools. At least in the part of the US that I live in, I actually think a lot of preferences are formed significantly younger. In the area of South Florida that I live in, that's about an hour north of Miami, our school district happens to be one of the largest districts in the country. I think it's the 10th or 15th biggest district in the country by students. So it has a lot of resources to do these interesting career academies. So what this means is by middle school, by sixth grade, by the time kids are 11 years old, there are already some of them picking that they want to take all of their electives in healthcare or IT or hospitality. And yeah, sure, data centers are a subset of IT, but yeah, it's crazy to think at like age 8, 9, 10 years old, parents and teachers are already trying to influence career progression. So yeah, it does start all the way in elementary school when kids are probably still playing with games and toys. And
No, I know it's I don't think it necessarily be too hard though to get kids at that age interested. What kid doesn't have TikTok? What kid doesn't go on YouTube? What kid doesn't take pictures and send to the friends, and send text messages or Snapchat or whatever it may be? If you can go to them and say, hey, without a data center you couldn't do any of this. And I think it is just making people aware of how important data centers are for us to live our lives. I mean, we wouldn't be right here doing what we're doing without a data center. I wouldn't, go and send some emails off after this podcast without a data center. I wouldn't have booked my studio apartment in Munich without a data center. It goes into everything, and I think there's a lot of people, young and older, that still just have no clue the part the data centers takes on life. I didn't until a couple of years ago, so I can't be too harsh on them.
There's no interesting apps for smartphones without data centers. There's no Netflix without data centers. There's no search engines without data centers. There's no social media. Like, everything depends. And even like what we're doing now, the first time I started podcasting in 2013, we were recording the episodes on Skype. And the technology for recording, at least on the Windows side, was so flaky and unreliable that we kind of kept our fingers crossed that we were going to get a good recording after all said and done. And then going back maybe 5 years before that was the first time I hosted webinars on GoToWebinar. And at the time, if I remember correctly, the voice over IP wasn't even working well. So people would watch the slides on the screen and they needed to dial in, which meant that in the US, most people by the late 2000s, like between 2005, 2010, probably had unlimited long distance. But it was a problem for people that were in the UK because they had to, if there wasn't a local number in the UK, it was crazy expensive for. So you think about just how recently the technology is. We take for granted now that webinars are old school and everyone knows how to do live stream, and YouTube's, LinkedIn and everything have been around 15, 20 years. But really, if you go back just one generation before this, it was really complicated and expensive to do live streaming. I mean, one of the reasons that Mark Cuban is a billionaire is because he figured out how to do a streaming fashion show online and had a great exit to Yahoo because of it.
Yeah. I mean, it is crazy how fast technology has advanced in the last, even 10 years, and it's very interesting to see where it's going to be in the next 10 years. I mean, when I speak to people about it, I say, I don't think my brain can genuinely fathom what technology will be in 10 years. I don't think I have the capacity to think of it, because if I did, I'd probably go and try and do it because I could make a lot of money from it. But yeah, it's going to be cool to see how technology progresses. I mean, we've now got ChatGPT. That's something that I'm using every day. There's probably certain things I use it for that may be a little stupid. It's give me a couple of ideas for what I can eat for tea tonight, and give me the recipe and how to cook it. I also, I've recently ran a marathon, so that did my marathon plan for me. Doing content creation on LinkedIn, sometimes it can be hard to think of ideas, so I'll go on there and I'll just bounce back with it. It's sort of a conversation with a person, and I'm not one of those people that just copies and pastes. Do not worry. I think that they are just way too obvious, but it at least gives me some ideas, and then I can, potentially tweak it, or I can go, oh, I can talk about that specific subject, and then I'll make it my own. I think ChatGPT is a really, really valuable tool as well, just in everyday life, again, not just in career.
Interesting too that you mentioned having conversations with ChatGPT and the generative AI, because Google in some ways is trying to maintain its share. They know their people are starting to switch using what they would have done in a Google search 5 years ago for Gen AI, and they have Gemini, and they have AI Essentials, and people are used to the nature of doing these iterative searches where you were doing a search and then you go and refine the search and refine the search.
Yeah.
But the reality is, in a very, very short period of time, ChatGPT and the other tools in that category have trained people to have these conversations with the tools that feel a lot more natural than the little box and the 10 blue links.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think, like you said there, 5 years ago, you would just hop onto Google and do a quick Google search. Whereas now, my first thought is, oh, I'll ask ChatGPT. If I'm having a debate with someone, or just out with friends and we're having a conversation and we can't think of an answer to something, I'll ChatGPT it. I won't even really think about Google, to be honest. And yeah, it is like a conversation. I mean, I wish I could show you the one where it did my marathon plan for me, because I just typed in marathon in X amount of time, and it came back and said, you'll need to do it at this pace, blah blah blah, and it was asking me questions. It was like, oh, are you training for a certain event? Oh yeah, I'm training for the Manchester Marathon. Oh, that's awesome. Have you got, sorry, it's like, how long have you got until the event? And I say 8 weeks, and it's go, oh, nice. Would you like to have a marathon plan put in place for you starting from now? Yes, please. And it's like, oh, what's your current base time for this length of distance? And then it'll be like, oh yeah, that's a really cool time. You're well on track to smash your goal marathon time, and just stuff like that. It's crazy. It is genuinely a conversation.
Almost feels like having a conversation with a personal trainer, right?
Yeah, basically. Yeah. It's scary even. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how AI affects certain industries, and which industries maybe become obsolete. Who knows?
Yeah, there's got to be so many interesting parallels to training for a marathon and having realistic expectations and putting in the work and everything with content and thought leadership and building a social media presence. I've had for years, like, colocation operators approach me and they name like a huge competitor in their space. Usually not quite as big as like Digital Realty or Equinix, but at that size, and like, we want our content to be as good as theirs. I'm like, well, then you probably needed to start 12 years ago. Oh no, we want to go faster. We want to catch up. I'm like, well, let's talk about realistically what you're trying to do. What's your ideal client profile? Who's the personas? What do you know about their journey? And I get these blank deer and headlight stares, and we're like, okay, let's talk about how many full-time resources they have and how many millions of pounds, euros, or dollars that they're investing in this. And let's come up with the steps that actually are realistic, where you can make some tangible progress. And it's the same. So by the time you ask ChatGPT for advice on training for the marathon, you were already running, you were already jogging for quite a while.
Yeah, I've been running now. Not actually thought over 2 years, maybe 2.5 years. I also do swimming and cycling. If you can put all three together, I'm a triathlete. But I would say I prefer running. Manchester Marathon was my first marathon that I've ever done. It was a super hot day, but awesome. I absolutely loved it. It's always good when you have an event, because the early mornings of going, getting up and going running before you start work, when it's dark and it's cold and it may be raining, and sacrificing other elements of your life to do the training. At the time, you think, oh, why am I doing this? I don't want to do this. But then you cross that finish line and you see all the work that you've put in. It's so rewarding. And I think I overlap that as well into all other aspects of my life, especially career, I would say. For instance, LinkedIn. Starting off doing the LinkedIn content creation, the first 3 to 6 months were hell, because I was getting no likes, no comments. It was very disheartening, because I was spending hours putting putting the content together, and some of it was awful. If I look back to a year ago what I was posting, it's going to be dreadful. But yeah, that's been a journey as well, and that's me training for a marathon, but I'm training towards this LinkedIn content creator sort of thing. So yeah, you can overlap it into a lot of aspects in your life.
But if people were only looking at the last 8 weeks, they might have a wildly unrealistic expectation of what it takes to start from scratch. So a lot of it is people understanding just the amount of endurance and how much work really goes into it. And congratulations, it's an amazing accomplishment.
Thank you. Yeah, it is hard work, but just so rewarding. And I think anyone that's thinking about starting running, do it. Runner's high is a real thing, I promise you. When you finish that run, you do feel good. You do feel good. So just start and see where it takes you.
There are from time to time some data center conferences that attach like a 5K or a charity run or something like that to what they're doing at the conference. There I was just in Northern Virginia this past week. They had, I think it was called the Data Center Cloud Run. That was, I want to say it was either 724 Exchange or a similar kind of group running this in the community. It was for people that work in the data center industry and inviting the whole community to participate. So maybe there's a podcast series for you and interviewing people in the data center industry that run.
Yeah.
The Data Center Running Club or something like that.
Or interviewing people while on a run.
There you go.
We do a nice slow run. I'll have a camera, we'll have the mic set up, and we can have a podcast while running.
Set up the GoPro.
Exactly. Yeah, there's maybe a market there. Yeah, definitely. But I think actually what you mentioned there is quite interesting. Is you've said that there's a 5K run attached to an event. We see a lot of that over here as well. I don't know what it's like in the US, but it feels like there's been a bit of a social shift over here towards fitness and health and alcohol. So I think over here we're seeing a lot more younger people actually going down the alcohol-free route, and you're seeing a lot more people get into running or anything that's attached to fitness, which is quite cool to see. Really, I don't know what it's like over there in the US.
Yeah, there's in general in the last 6 months to a year, the news is spreading about the links between alcohol and cancer risk, and
Wow.
because of that, it's starting to change habits. And you wonder, as more of that spreads, do conference organizers need to get a better bribe to get people to hang out near the booths, because the open bar, I don't know, I guess they'll just have soft drinks or juices or something like that to replace that. Sports is another industry that's got massive implications if all of a sudden there aren't huge stadium sponsorships by like huge companies like Anheuser-Busch throughout the. And it's not just baseball and football. It's basically all of professional sports has historically had significant money flowing through from the beverage industry, and it's probably more of an issue in broadcast TV. Broadcast TV has its own issues now, of which what we're doing right here and now is taking people away from watching.
It's the competitor. TV. Yeah, we're the competitors right now.
YouTube is disrupting I see somewhere that YouTube session time or hours of watch time is closing in on Netflix or net clips. It's insane the amount of time that people spend watching YouTube. And what I think a lot of people that are outside of the content business don't realize is there's a ton of people now that are watching YouTube on TV. So it's not like, well, I would never watch a 2-hour movie on my smartphone or on my laptop, but no, like almost all TVs now come with the YouTube app built in where you can just cast from your phone.
Oh, mate, YouTube is taking over. It's taking over the scene. I mean, there are certain YouTubers that come to mind. So there's a guy called Mr. Beast. I don't know how familiar you are with Mr. Beast. He puts out a video, and within one day, he's got 70 million views. So within one day, 70 million people around the world have viewed his content. And I think the rise of YouTube probably comes from the younger generation. I know when I was younger, YouTube at that time was becoming what it is today. So I sort of got in there in its early days, and I'm just thinking now a lot of kids do watch YouTube as opposed to Netflix. So as they grow older, they continue to watch YouTube, and then Netflix sort of comes down and YouTube carries on going. But you're seeing them in complete different industries. I mean, there's now YouTube boxing, there's YouTube football events that are selling out and selling pay-per-view and making hundreds of millions of pounds. It's incredible. It's absolutely incredible what YouTube has done. So again, it is a great platform.
And it's great for distribution for all kinds of educational content, including Critical Connect, including
I need to get on that. Actually, because I do also do the visuals as opposed to just audio. So at the moment it is just Spotify and Apple, but YouTube could be a shout actually. Yeah, it's a good point.
I'd say for our industry, after LinkedIn, I think YouTube may be the most significantly important. And as search habits are changing and a lot of the traditional SEO investments that people made over the years are starting to be much less impactful, and even search engine marketing like Google Ads starts to become more disrupted by more people using ChatGPT, I think YouTube's going to hold its own in many ways because it's a backdoor into search and it's also a social platform of its own. Yeah,
definitely. And it's authentic content. It's Netflix's and Apple TVs and Primes, the people that are maybe wanting to create content, they may not tick all the boxes that Netflix has. Whereas I think YouTube is very open. I think you can pretty much record what you want and then upload it. I don't know the complete ins and outs, but that allows people to then keep their authenticity rather than have to take certain bits of their personality out that maybe Netflix wouldn't like or Sky wouldn't like or anything like that. So again, it just comes back to the authenticity, which is why podcasts are so good as well, right? It's just two dudes having a conversation about data centers and marathons and content and and AI and putting it out there for people to listen and hopefully enjoy.
That's an interesting challenge you raise as well with people that want to do podcasting that work for large employers that want too much control over the content of the podcasting. And I think it stops certain people from starting a podcast. I know for sure that there's a lot of people who've wanted to be guests on the podcast I host that literally are like blocked because there's only a handful of people in the company that are media trained and allowed to talk to media. Like they don't differentiate between talking to podcasts like our size versus going on BBC or CNBC or Bloomberg or CNN or something like that. It's all the same in their eyes. So there's this censorship to a certain degree that goes on both. I guess part of it is internal marketing, part of it's PR agencies with wanting to control this message. So that's kind of the opposite of the authenticity, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've come up against everything that you've said there. So, I've had guests that have come back to me on LinkedIn and said that they're really interested, and then a couple of days later they say, "Sorry, I can't. I've been told I'm not allowed to." And then I've had other ones that have been that have come back and said can we not discuss A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all of the above? And it's like, well, I don't really want to do it like that, because then it is very much just confined to what you want to talk about. And more than likely it will just come into a sell for whoever I'm bringing on, and just them selling their company. And again, that's not what this is about. This is about, having an authentic conversation. And then also, for me, I wanted to do a podcast before I started one. I knew that I wanted to do a podcast before I even set up my own company. But again, I wouldn't have wanted to do it at my old company, because I wouldn't have wanted them to have any say in it, really, and take control, and then also reap the rewards of me putting the work in. I wanted it to be for me, and me have the ability to bring on who I want to bring on and ask these questions, and it's just about having that control. So yeah, I've come up against all of that.
Because in theory, if you have a boss, not only are they controlling the topics, they may all of a sudden want to control who you're inviting, because they want the guest list to coincide with their target account list, which gets back to unrealistic or inappropriate expectations on using the podcast as a funnel for unadulterated business development with no inkling of playing the long game whatsoever. So there's a lot of interesting implications that come up with not being able to separate the editorial from the commercial. James, the final area I wanted to ask you about today is, I know you mentioned the extreme difficulty of predicting out 10 years, but if you think about like 2 years out, how do you think your job, your career as a recruiter specializing in data center construction might change? What do you think will stay the same? What do you think could change significantly over the next 10 years in the business of recruiting for data center construction?
So I do think that at some point in the future, be that 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, I do think that there will at some point become an AI tool that can do the bare bones of what I do. Let's say you've got an AI tool, X client wants Y position filled. He types in the requirements of the job, and then the AI might be able to go and scout on LinkedIn or job boards or whatever it may be. I do think that probably will become a tool. It's probably being made as we speak. I think the success of the tool is going to be quite a way off, because it isn't just about me speaking to a client who needs to fill a position and go and finding that person. It's also referencing the candidates, so speaking to ex-employers and making sure that they're not lying on their CV. So it's reference checks, it's meeting with the candidates to make sure that I'm properly vetting them. It's setting up interviews, it's going through offer stages, it's going through negotiations with the client and the candidate. So I think there could be a tool for just doing the bare minimum. But then I think as well, on the flip side, people at the moment still like to buy from people. So I think there will always be a need for someone like me. Maybe certain people in the industry would be replaced by a tool. But I think for the most part at the moment, people still want to buy from people. So I think we can expect that down the line. In terms of LinkedIn, I would say I don't see that changing. I think people still like to go on to a platform and scroll and read about certain content that that people are putting out there. I think that's still going to be quite prevalent across the next 2 to 5 years. So I think that's maybe I would have a tool that can go and find candidates, and then I can then do the rest of it. So the reference taking, the meeting, the interview setups and negotiations. But maybe there'll be a tool that I can use for that, if that makes sense.
I think there's going to be opportunities as well that will be directly related to the learnings that you've had in this 2 years period. Like, for example, candidates and hiring managers that want to get into podcasting.
Yeah.
And need someone to help guide and coach them on the strategy and aggregate demand and connect the dots on making this all work together. But yeah, for sure, it changes. I was talking to someone yesterday and explaining how in content and thought leadership, there was a time 10 years ago where I had a much bigger budget for copy editing than I do today. Grammarly has gotten so good that we still use copy editors from time to time, but it does a lot of the routine stuff. As recently as 3 or 4 years ago, we were spending a lot more on graphic design than we did today. And to a certain degree, as Canva keeps getting better, it lessens the need for some of that, but it shifts the competitive battleground. And in a world where everyone has access to the same tools, it keeps leveling up and leveling up and leveling up. And the reinvention and the relearning is a huge part of all of this.
Yeah, for sure. I think, like you've mentioned there, you need to look at it as a tool as opposed to something that's against you or coming for your job. If you want to say it like that. I think AI and its advancements are here to stay, and they're only going to get more. So either keep up and get on board, or unfortunately get left behind.
No. I look at a generation ago, there were people that still went to travel agents to book hotel rooms and flights. Maybe as recent, I'm thinking probably sometime in the 80s. I remember going with my parents to travel agents to get airline tickets. And within 10 years, it would be unthinkable with Expedia and all these sites, and then all the airline sites doing themselves. But even when it comes to hotels and cruise industry, they need people that have expertise. So you're taking some of that transferable expertise and you're going to work for Royal Caribbean or Carnival or whatever with those kinds of transferable skills, or you're doing online marketing or aggregation or groups or something. It changes the unit economics. I think in the data center ecosystem, we're going to continue to see more consolidation with the small operators because of power availability, because of unit economics. But that's been going on for 10, 15, 20 years. Nearly every small colocation company that I'd worked with in the 2010s has now, the owners have now exited to a larger company that's been acquired. I've scratched my head to think of all the dozens of people that I did some kind of engagement with in the 2010s. If there's any of the small single location operators that are still left standing that didn't have some kind of exit to a larger company. It's just the nature of how most of these unit economics work. So super interesting that you're thinking about what the apps are going to do and how to continue reinventing yourself and continuing to stay relevant. And by podcasting, probably see opportunities months or years before everyone else. Great research.
Hopefully.
Staying close to the clients on both sides is a key part with that. So you doing your own original research as opposed to it being recapped by somebody else.
Yeah, exactly. And kudos to you as well, man. You've built out a really good and cool podcast here that I see is doing very well. So yeah, kudos to you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And it's great to see what you're doing as well to elevate and demonstrate that it's possible to get started and start to see inroads with the relationships that you're building and start to see all these great research insights that help you refine your approach and better understand and be an even better consultant and trusted advisor for both kinds of stakeholders that you work with. So this is terrific. James, if someone wants to learn more about you, follow you, connect with you, LinkedIn, best place?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely LinkedIn. That's where everything lives for me. So yeah, LinkedIn is the place to go.
Is there a website you'd send them to, or is LinkedIn and your company page the best place to?
Yeah, I would say even for company page, I would say my LinkedIn is more prevalent. I do have a website, but it's pretty bare boned, I would say. That's probably my bad. I could probably do with doing a little bit onto it. But again, if I'm working with a new client, I don't go to the website first. I go to the LinkedIn page first. So I'm just sort of following suit.
Yeah, I know that makes a lot of sense. We'll include links to your company page and your profile in the blog posts and the show notes with this so people can reach out and get in touch. But it's been terrific, super fascinating conversation to learn about not only the recruiting business model, but to learn about how you're niching down specifically within these 3 or 4 segments of data center construction and how it's giving you unique insights faster to provide more value on both the hiring manager side. on the candidate side. Super interesting as well to the story you shared about being at the conference where everyone was ignoring you as a recruiter, but all of a sudden as a podcast host, it's opening doors. So
yeah, definitely.
Great to hear all of that.
No, I really appreciate your just having this cool conversation, man. It's been I was a little nervous coming on at first because I'm not used to being the guest. I'm used to being the host, asking the questions, but it's been really fun. So yeah, thank you.
Oh, you already did the hard part. You ran the marathon.
Yeah, exactly.
After that podcasting is it's downhill, right?
Yeah, piece of cake.
That's awesome. That's terrific. So I've been speaking with James Wilkinson, who is the founder of Critical Connect, specializing in data center construction, talent solutions, and recruiting, and podcast host of Critical Connect. James is based in the UK and works with clients all over Europe, right?
Yeah, all
Awesome.
the UK and Europe.
Awesome. Thanks again, James. Really appreciate it.
Cheers, Joshua. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, man.
Likewise.
The Data Center Go-to-Market podcast is sponsored by DCSMI, elevating the role of sales, marketing, and go-to-market GTM professionals in the growth of the data center industry. To stay informed about upcoming episodes, make sure that you subscribe to the Data Center Sales and Marketing newsletter on the DCSMI website that can be found at www.dcsmi.com. Again, that URL is www.dcsmi.com.